Okay, thank you very much. Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Good. Thank you so much for coming. So today I will be talking about what are you talking about, how others perceive devs and DevOps. So I will just be starting with an apology. The slides I'll be showing you today have a lot of text in them. It's not the way I normally like to do my slides, but I have somewhat of an accent. Some people think it's quite strong, others don't, but I thought it would be more important for you to actually hear and understand what I'm saying than to have pretty slides, so sorry about that. I won't be putting anything on the slides that I won't also be saying, so feel free to not read them and just think of them more like subtitles. So in this talk called What Are You Talking About? I did feel the need to use subtitles, and yes, I understand the irony in that. So let's get started. A little bit about me, first of all. So I will often describe myself as a tester. I've been testing professionally for about 2.5 years now. I'm also a UX enthusiast, blogger, and I've spoken at different conferences around the world as well. Sometimes you'll also see me describe myself as a software investigator, quality advocate. I'm also a little bit of a hippie, and I'm an intersectional feminist who identifies with the terms she and they. If you want to ask me about that later, feel free. I'm happy to talk to you about it. So that's what I am currently. I used to also be an IT recruiter, a tech support specialist, and UX ninja. So that was sort of the amalgamation of tester, product owner, and business analyst all rolled into one. So I've done a lot of different things. What am I doing here? I must admit, when Lewis first contacted me to speak here, and I did a little bit of research, and I saw, very technical conference, a lot of technical talks in the past. Even though I work in a DevOps and cloud native department, I felt a little bit intimidated. I thought, what could I possibly have to offer the audience and the attendees here? And so, I tried to think about, what might the organisers see in me, and what can I bring to this event? So obviously I have quite a bit of a different perspective. As I say, I'm not super technical. Maybe that's quite different to the other speakers here today. And I think, through that I can maybe offer a bit of a different angle, and also through the different roles and different jobs that I've done. I've been pretty much everything apart from developer. And also I have, core skills that are useful in technical and non-technical environments. So I thought, don't be scared. I'll just lean into some of my differences in the skills that I do have to hopefully still be able to bring some value to you all today. So what we will be looking at today, firstly, we'll have a look at who others are in the context of how others perceive devs and DevOps. We'll consider some of the questions that those people might have, and then the main part of the talk will focus on my own perceptions of development and DevOps through the different roles that I've had in my career, and how those perceptions have changed as my journey has gone on. We'll look at my journey to understanding, how you can help other people to understand as well, and then we'll just finish with a bit of a summary of the benefits to all of this. But first, a disclaimer. So all of the content in this talk is just based on my own personal experiences and thoughts, and it won't necessarily be shared by the other people, even if they are in the same roles that I've been in. But I'm hoping that what I'm sharing with you today can still help you to understand how developers and DevOps might be perceived by other people. So if it's not in line with how you see it, maybe you can do something to correct that. So firstly, just a quick show of hands. Who here has always felt completely comfortable and confident in their understanding of development and DevOps? Oh, one lonely hand. A couple, yeah. Never been confused, never wondered what's going on. Fair enough. And what about everybody else? Who has, at some point, felt a little bit confused about concepts about development and DevOps? More of you, yeah, okay. So if you consider that, the people here today, we are the practitioners and a lot of experts in the room about development and DevOps. If a lot of us here have been confused at some point about these things, what about everyone else in our lives? What about the tester trying to find their place in DevOps, wondering, how they're going to fit in? The CEO who says, oh, we want to do DevOps. The sales manager who decides to promise a shiny new feature to a client that actually is quite difficult and will take quite a long time to implement. How will all of these people learn about what it is that we all do? And how much easier would it be for us all round if we were on the same page about the different environments and challenges that we face in our day-to-day work? So some questions that other people might have. What is it developers actually do? Obviously to us, that will probably be quite obvious, but to other people, it can still be seen as a bit of magic. How do developers know so much? How do you know all these different languages? How to create things, make things do what we want? What does DevOps really mean? I think it's kind of the hot topic at the moment. It's a bit of a buzzword, much like Agile, but what actually is it? And again, how can we do DevOps? That's my least favorite one. So let's move into looking at some of my perceptions, starting off with when I was a student. So when I was in high school, I went to high school in the 2000s. And yeah, I thought that IT was just full of all these old, boring men. I had this, picture in my head. It was sort of Y2K time-ish. So, men who had been in IT at some point, who, were just not exactly role models for me. That was my perception of IT. There were a lot of new technologies that just seemed to be like fads or fashions. For example, like flip phones. Everyone was really into those at one point. Then everyone wanted to make them really, really small. Now the trend is to make them all really, really big. And when I was at school, the teacher said that if you already know how to turn on a computer and print something, then don't bother picking computing as a subject, because there's nothing else for you to learn. You've got the basics, that's it. Don't bother. So I'm hoping that that's a very different message from what you've all had when you were at school, but this is what I was told, so I didn't take computing because I could print. I thought I didn't need to. But I was customizing, Bebo and MySpace profiles using HTML, but I had no idea that that was a kind of programming. I just thought that was something that I did after school. So now, with a little bit of experience, I know that there are a lot of efforts to diversify IT, which I'm very happy about, and I'm glad that Jay on the Beach is trying to contribute to that by having a lot of women speakers and code of conduct and things like that. I know now that obviously technology is one of the most powerful and influential industries in the world. People watch like Amazon stocks and things really depend on what's happening in technology. And I know now as well that there are lots of different kinds of development, so web, backend, API, database. There are so many things within development. It's actually more of like a kind of umbrella term, if you will. And so you never really just do anything in development. For example, someone says, oh, just put a button there. It's not just a button. The button is the representation of an entire feature of lots of different layers of working and communicating on different levels. So when I came into the working world, I did a bunch of stuff in banking, but then I also became an IT recruiter. So I'm sure a lot of you have experiences with recruitment people. I won't ask you how those went. But when I was in IT, I recruited for a lot of roles that were like X analyst, Y developer, and there were a lot of different names of these different roles, and I really struggled actually to be able to tell the difference between them. Full stack developer, back-end developer, C# developer, what is the difference? What does that all really mean? And it wasn't helped by the fact that I didn't have any training when I got into recruitment, and the hiring managers that I was working with, they were very rarely actually even willing to speak to me about the roles and to tell me what it was that they were actually looking for and who they expected me to find. So I was kind of left to my own devices to work it out for myself. And so I looked at the job specs and the CVs, and it was the certifications, technologies, and the buzzwords that stood out. They appeared to me at the time to be the only real differentiators between different kinds of roles. So maybe that sounds familiar to you when you get a call from a recruiter. With a little bit of experience, I thankfully have learned that certifications, technologies, those are some of the least important factors in finding good developers. What makes a good developer is more about the mindset, communication skills, creativity, business expertise. Those are the sort of the core skills for development who can really be of value to the business, not just about what languages you can program in. I've also learned that IT roles can have a lot of different names. Even within the same organization, there can be several names for basically the same job. And also, because technology is moving on so quickly, and we have these concepts like Agile and DevOps that come into fashion, even roles under the same name, they can change very quickly over time as well. So I'm a lot less caught up with roles and job titles now, thankfully. And I know now as well that a lot of recruiters have a very similar experience as I did. A lot of them don't really understand the roles that they're actually recruiting for. So there's definitely a lack of education, unfortunately, amongst the people who we would hope would know about those things. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of very good, knowledgeable recruiters as well, but on the most part, there's not enough knowledge there. So I can sympathise now with the recruiters that call me with roles that don't seem to quite make sense. When I was recruiting in IT, I obviously learned more about it, and I got very interested in programming and development, so I decided that I wanted to try and learn to code a little bit as well. And through that experience, I was kind of convinced that there was a right language to learn. Obviously I was in recruitment myself, so I'd seen a lot of these languages floating around, and I thought, if I want to do this as my job at some point, I need to learn the right language. If I pick the wrong one, then that'll be it. I also was Googling for, the right order to learn things in. Sometimes if there was something in particular that caught my interest, I would think, oh no, that's not at my level, that's not at the stage I am in learning. And so I stopped myself from looking into things that I was interested in because I had this idea that, there were certain steps to follow. And I thought that I wasn't allowed to Google anything as well. I think that maybe comes from the way that we're taught at school, to memorize all these textbooks and then to go into an exam without any of those books and just to regurgitate the information. That was the idea I had of the real world at the time. And I also thought that development was just about writing code. I thought if I learn a language or two, start bashing out some lines of code, then that's all there is to it. Now things have changed, so I've learned that firstly JavaScript has nothing to do with Java. That was actually a real surprise to me. I also know that there's a lot of other things involved in development and programming. You need to learn about frameworks, infrastructure, methodologies, communication is super important, domain knowledge as well, so many different things to learn about. And eidetic memory isn't necessary, which is good. I love seeing, really established programmers and, IT experts when they post on Twitter and say, oh, I've been developing for 30 years and I had to Google this really basic method. Don't worry, we all do it. So that's very reassuring. That's nice. And I know now as well that developers do lots of other things like designing, testing, and having conversations with rubber ducks. So, when a product manager or product owner asks, oh, how long will it take you to write this feature? Now I understand that that's not really the right question to ask because there's so many other things involved before we even come to write any code at all. After I was a recruiter, I then, properly got into technology with my first role in tech support. So, talking to real customers about issues that they were having. And one of the first things that I was told in this company was don't speak directly to developers. It was my first job in technology, so I didn't question it. I thought, okay, fair enough. Won't talk to them. But of course, that created a divide, created a silo, and it wasn't good, to say the least. I thought that bug fixes took a long time as well. And because I couldn't talk to the developers, because there was this wall in many senses, I thought, what's taking so long? I've got all these customers phoning me, emailing me, telling about these problems that we have. why haven't the developers fixed it yet? What on earth are they doing? And I also thought that hotfixes took far too long as well. And this wasn't even just in the sense of, the infrastructure or the environments. Again, I thought it was the developers. I thought the developers would be slow, that, they were just taking their sweet time while I was having to deal with all these complaints. And I didn't understand what was really going on. So that disconnect, for me, translated into disregard. And I thought that developers just didn't care about our customers. They didn't care about helping users. When I then moved into the tester and product owner role, thankfully, I then began to work directly with developers. I started to speak to them a lot more. So all those perceptions, that's when things really started to change. And I realized that actually developers do care about quality and delivering a valuable product, which is good, obviously. But developers, they also need detailed steps to reproduce issues. When I first started that tech support role, it was very much, just email the error number. The developers will find it in the log, just tell them the time. So I had to do a lot of work to change the reporting process and to, get information in the bug reports that would actually help developers to pinpoint and fix the issues. I also learned that developers face a lot of obstacles and challenges. So now I know that they're not all just being slow on purpose. They're not, spending an hour in the kitchen mixing their favorite coffees. There are actually a lot more other things that they have to deal with. Things like poor infrastructure, environments, legacy code, all kinds of things that could be slowing down the process of fixing issues. And one of the most important lessons that I learned as a product owner is that developers do much better work when they know what problem we're trying to solve. So it was a very small company that I worked in, and I worked very closely with the CEO, and we would often discuss new features. It was almost like a two amigos, but without any actual development person, and we would just between the two of us decide how to solve problems, and to an extent, how to implement it technically as well. And one of the things the CEO used to love saying was, "Oh well, we kind of want it to be like this, so just tell them to copy and paste it." They'll just, copy and paste it over, and that's what we want. So obviously, not a good idea. But then when we actually started to bring developers into the conversation earlier on and share the actual problem with them and say, this is what we're trying to solve, this is the issue that users have, then we could do much better work as a team. Developers were able to use their expertise, their creativity, and actually come up with something really, really good. So that's, a lot about development that I've talked about so far. What about DevOps? So although DevOps, I think, has been around for almost 10 years now, I think just in the last couple of years, it seems to be discussed a lot more. And as I say, I've been professionally testing for about 2.5 years, so still all very recent for me, certainly. But a few of the things that I noticed is that people talk about doing DevOps very much like they talk about doing Agile. That kind of annoys me because, how can you do an adjective? It just doesn't really make sense. Again, this thing with, fashion and buzzwords, DevOps seems to be very popular at the moment, but one of the questions I was asking when I first learned about it was, is this going to last? Is this just a fashion, or are we really onto something here? And I really thought as well that a lot of the articles and blogs that I was reading trying to understand what DevOps is, they were a lot of the time written for people who already know what DevOps is. So for me, just trying to learn about it, it was really hard. I thought, how can I possibly break into this and, really learn about it if, I don't really feel like I can even understand the basic concepts. So that was really tricky for me. So let's just take a quick look at Wikipedia's definition of DevOps. DevOps is a software engineering culture and practice that aims at unifying software development dev and software operations ops. The main characteristic is to strongly advocate automation and monitoring at all steps of software construction. DevOps aims at shorter development life cycles, increased development frequency, and more dependable releases. Who, by a show of hands, kind of feels okay with that definition? Like, not the best, but kind of is all right. A few of you. I feel like it's all right. But at the time, this really confused me. I thought, what on earth does that mean? This is just like words, totally clueless. And some of the reasons why this didn't help me, the main reason was about context. So I, at the time, was working in a startup that had maybe about 15 employees altogether. 6 of those were developers. And so with such a small company, there was no need to have a separate dev and ops department. You know, I had never seen the problem that DevOps was trying to solve in the first place, so I didn't really get what was happening. I was coming obviously from a sales and business background as well, not a computing one, so that was my context, and that was all the information and the knowledge that I was applying to these definitions that I saw. And so far, this was the only technology job that I'd had, so I had no experience of any other real environments at the time. This was just kind of how I thought things were, and so I couldn't really reference anything else to help me understand these definitions. And so I thought, coming from a business background, that ops was like finance, HR, office management, and the kind of IT support who fixes your printer. So it's kind of coming full circle to this thing about printers. I couldn't understand, why would you want a developer to work with the finance department? I couldn't understand why everyone was so crazy about this idea. It didn't make any sense to me. And so I can't remember how or when the penny dropped, and I realized that that wasn't the kind of ops that people were talking about, but I just remember the feeling of, wow, I really misunderstood this. So yeah, I'm glad that I eventually realized what was going on. So the way that I understand DevOps now is that just like Agile, it's more about culture than it is about processes. So people love to get hung up about, if you want to go with this methodology, you need to do X, Y, Z. And I think with DevOps, it's kind of similar sort of thing that people are doing. It is very closely related to continuous delivery, continuous integration, things like that. And I feel like people often get them confused. I was recently at an SRE meetup where someone asked, what do you think is the difference between SRE and DevOps? And someone stood up and said, SRE is all about, the culture and the way of doing things, and DevOps is only about the tools. DevOps tells you which tools you need to use. It's just like, really? And this is at an SRE meetup as well, so that to me made it quite obvious that people really don't agree or understand what these things are. And I know now that ops is things like availability, monitoring, environments, deployment, all kinds of other stuff. And looking at these things, I kind of feel like ops is very often forgotten about or underappreciated. And as a tester, that's something that I can really relate to. I think that DevOps doesn't always have to be this big radical change. As I mentioned, the first technology company that I worked for, there was no separation of dev and ops anyway, so for them to come into the DevOps culture and way of doing things, it doesn't have to be this big reorganization. It can sometimes be, a lot more straightforward than people make it out to be. And I now believe as well that DevOps is not a fashion, it's more of a natural evolution from Agile. And so I have this nice sort of diagram from the people at Myborn Wolf, where I work. So here it's just showing that with Agile, it brought business and development closer together. And then with DevOps, the gap between dev and ops is being shortened. So it just seems to make sense to me now as a progression from Agile. So what things helped me to understand this and to finally feel like I was understanding it all? Firstly, to have a genuine interest. I'm so happy that I work in technology now. It feels a lot different, to the perceptions that I had of it when I was at school, and I was just learning about IT. So now I just want to learn about all kinds of things and read lots and lots of stuff, come to lots of conferences. So as I say, did a lot of research and reading into different things. A lot of the things I read more than once as well. And I also have a community of very knowledgeable people. I'm very active on Twitter, and that means that I get exposure to a lot of good resources that they share. I can see the conversations that they're having, the challenges that they're facing, and to sort of keep up with what's going on. A lot of perseverance helps. As I explained, for a long time, I really didn't understand development and DevOps, but I kept at it, I kept trying, kept reading all those articles, and eventually it clicked. And I also use what I call the rabbit poop approach to learning. So yeah, it's not my accent, poop. So I do have a blog explaining what this is, but just quickly I'll show you this diagram. So for me, there are 3 stages in the learning cycle: to absorb information, experience the stuff for yourself, and then to teach people. So in the rabbit poop approach to learning, you might know this already, rabbits eat their own poop so that they can process the same food, the same resources multiple times to further extract the nutrients and the good stuff that they didn't get the first time around. So in my learning, I do a very similar thing. So when I'm first absorbing information, I just have my current context, which is often very little or nothing. And then once I experience things a little bit more, I gain more knowledge, I gain more context, and then when I process those same resources again with that increased context with the more knowledge, I can then apply that more to the same resources and understand, oh, okay, that's like what I saw, then this is what they're actually talking about. So there you go, the rabbit poop approach to learning. So some ideas for you all to help other people to understand as well. I think one of the most important things, mentioned it a few times already in this talk, is about context. So someone comes to you and they say, Katrina, Jose, I would really like to learn more about what you do as a developer. Can you teach me some stuff about DevOps? What will really help, I think, in you sort of teaching them about some of these contexts is to understand their motivation for learning. Why are they asking you these questions? Is it because they're just interested in what you do? Is it the CEO who wants to do DevOps and thinks, how will we do that? Let's go and find out and ask these people. Is it someone who wants to become a developer themselves? A tester who wants to understand how monitoring can be used to help further advanced testing? What is the context of the people who you're teaching? And what is their current level of knowledge? Sometimes things can be pitched at too high a level, and it just completely goes over people's heads. But alternatively, you can underestimate their current knowledge, and it just feels like a bit patronizing, or that you're going over things that they already know. So understanding the context of the other person, their needs, and their current knowledge, I think will be very, very helpful. Not to ask any sort of assuming or leading questions. I will just explain that a little bit further in the next slide. Using analogies, comparisons, and models can also be very, very helpful as well as a different way to think about the concepts or to visualize them a little bit better. High-level digestible blocks of information, I think when you're first learning about something, is going to be a lot more helpful than, going right into the details straight away. A lot of things, obviously, in development are very nuanced. There's a lot going on, so it can be tempting to be very, very specific about what we're talking about, but a high-level overview to start out with first will be easier to grasp, and then once there's an understanding of those concepts, then you can sort of drill down a little bit deeper. And also patience. Please be patient, especially in the rabbit poop approach to testing, to learning. You might be asked the same questions over and over again with slightly different words. You might be asked to explain the same concepts multiple times. Please be patient. It's not because people are trying to annoy you, it's just because they're really trying to learn and understand. And I think that can only be a good thing to have other people, especially in the business and our teams, to understand more about what it is that we do. So just some examples for you. So there are a few YouTube channels that I really like for just explaining difficult or mysterious concepts. These channels, Kurzgesagt, which I believe means in a nutshell, ASAP Science and Casual Explained, they all do a really good job of explaining complicated concepts in 3 to 8 minute videos, and they're very good examples of how you can give like a high level overview to someone without specialist knowledge. When I talked about no leading or assuming questions, instead of starting explaining something by saying, oh, well, you know about this, and oh, you already know about that, and just sort of diving straight into it, it's harder for people to say, oh, actually, I don't know about that, so let's take a step back. By saying things like, have you heard of this? Are you familiar with that? It gives a chance for people to say, oh, I don't know, without making them feel stupid. Because when you're trying to learn stuff, most of the time you know that you don't know, so you don't really want that to be pointed out anymore, that you know less than other people. In terms of analogies, cattle, not pets, is a very popular one for DevOps. So cattle get slaughtered, pets are loved. Different diagrams and animations can be very helpful in helping people to understand how things work as well. Rebecca Taft did a talk earlier today where she used a lot of really good visualizations and animations that really showed how things go through, and I thought it was very, very accessible. And having shared goals is really good to help understanding as well. So if we go back to what I said earlier with, developers do better work when they understand the problems we're trying to solve, it's similar here. So if we all know what we're trying to solve or where we're trying to get to, it's a lot easier for us to come to a common understanding of how to get there. So now we're coming to the end. So just a summary of the benefits. Firstly, better relationships to build a better rapport with your team and other people in the business. Two-way empathy and understanding. So, you need to understand their context to teach them better. And then once you teach them, they understand more about what it is that you're doing, which is good. And by doing that, you help people to help you. So back again when I was in tech support and I wasn't talking to developers, I didn't understand their context. I didn't understand how to help them with bug reports because I didn't know what it was that they were doing. But once I understood that, then I was able to give them a lot more useful information and I was able to actually be helpful. You can also dispel myths and prevent misinformation. So, and again, in that example where the business decides they want to do DevOps, maybe because you've built a reputation for being someone who's very open to teaching people about stuff, maybe before rolling out radical changes, they'll come to you and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. What's your opinion? What's your take on this? And you can really be part of, big decisions in the company. And it also helps to solidify your own learning. So in the learning cycle that I showed you before, teaching was the final stage in learning. I feel like when you teach other people and they ask you questions, it highlights to you what you already know and what you don't know. It challenges your own assumptions. And I really feel like by teaching other people, you kind of teach yourself as well. So that's actually kind of what I'm doing today, I guess, with this talk as well. So thank you very much for listening and for being a part of that.